Today, I wanted to talk about an interesting Yu-Gi-Oh topic that's kind of been on my mind lately, and that is Yu-Gi-Oh! Collabs or crossovers. I'm not gonna lie, this was heavily inspired by Magic the Gathering's recent series of Universes Beyond and Secret Lairs sets, where they basically take other existing IP and implement them into Magic the Gathering. They've done the recent Final Fantasy collab that I'm sure you can't have not heard about, and they've got a Marvel one coming later this year. They did Lord of the Rings a couple years back, and that was huge with the One Ring and everything like that. But they've even done more obscure sort of stuff. My Little Pony collab. This is certainly a controversial thing just right off the bat, because Magic the Gathering, there are some benefits and some downsides to doing this. And the obvious appeal if you're Wizard of the Coast or Hasbro is that by doing these like crossover IP collabs and stuff, you get to pull in a lot of people who are interested in those things. If you're a Final Fantasy fan, then you'll definitely be at least somewhat interested in getting the Final Fantasy Magic cards. But on the player side, it sort of is a bit of a mixed bag, because while some people like it, others feel that it kind of takes away from the core identity of Magic the Gathering. Half of the Magic the Gathering sets released this year are crossovers and collabs, and that's something that is divisive, to be sure. To bring this conversation back to Yu-Gi-Oh!, it made me wonder, could Yu-Gi-Oh! Do something similar? Should Yu-Gi-Oh! Do something similar? And what would be the best way to mitigate the troubles that some players have with like Magic the Gathering's implementation of this? Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an interesting game. Unlike Magic the Gathering, I feel like the fact that it's just made by a Japanese company means that the idea of doing collabs is already significantly less, right? Like Hasbro, it's a Western company that they want money, and they're more than willing to sacrifice their game's purity or whatever to do it. But I think with Yu-Gi-Oh! It's much more of Konami's like sort of child, their baby, and so they don't really want to like, you know, mess around with it too much. That said though, Yu-Gi-Oh! Does have a small history of collabs and also references and callouts. The Gradius archetype, that's based on a Konami old arcade video game series, the Gradius series. But then you also have a few references to Konami IPs. There are small references to Castlevania, like the Vampire archetype has a few of them, Vampire Lord. And then also you've got some to Metal Gear Solid, another Konami IP. The point is, Konami does do these sort of like indirect like references or callbacks to other IPs that they own. And so I think that would be an interesting place to start with collabs, because unlike Magic, where it's just kind of like everything is fair game, I think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Could be could take a more sort of measured approach by basically having archetypes dedicated to other Konami things, other Konami IPs. Maybe a full Metal Gear Solid archetype, maybe a full archetype about Castlevania. I think there could be a little bit more there that wouldn't feel like it's completely diluting things or coming out of left field. I mean, they sort of did do that with Gradius. So other things that Konami actually owns right now, Bomberman, that's something that sort of feels like there's a little bit of potential there. I think the general idea everybody has is give archetypes based on IPs, right? With Magic, it's, you know, a whole entire set that's based on the IP. I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be hard pressed to do all of that, but I think that giving an archetype based on Castlevania is certainly well within the realm of possibility. Another thing though that Yu-Gi-Oh! Often does is it does have a lot of pop culture inspiration within its archetypes. So there's obviously things like the Cosmo archetype that's based on Star Wars and Wizard of Oz, but it's not like directly named that stuff. Like it just, you can sort of see the inspiration, like the creative combinations of those things. There are also things like the Super Quants, which are basically Super Sentai or Power Rangers inspired. There's definitely something there, and I think Yu-Gi-Oh!, I will say, is more tasteful when it's more of like a pop culture reference as opposed to an actual IP or crossover. But there are also a few other IP crossovers that they have done as well. And these are like really small and minuscule, but for instance, there is the Power Pro Baseball collab that they did. I think they got like exactly 1 or 2 cards that were based on Power Pro Baseball. And one's like really just a kind of a reinterpretation of Harpy Lady Sisters, but that actually got me thinking that maybe that's the way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Does like IP collabs. Instead of, you know, entire Universes Beyond set or something, they could maybe pull a Secret Lairs-esque thing, where in Magic the Gathering, Secret Lairs, at least as I understand it, is mostly an IP that's getting like its characters and items and stuff as Magic cards, but they actually are just alt arts or sort of recolors or whatever of existing Magic the Gathering staples and well-known like cards and stuff. So the idea with like a secret layer isn't that you're actually introducing like an entirely new set of cards to the game, but you're just like getting basically in Yu-Gi-Oh terms, imagine a mystical space typhoon that's like Sonic the Hedgehog's blue tornado. I'm throwing out very random examples here. It's just more of like an aesthetic coat of paint. So you can play, you know, your Raigekis and your Lightning Storms, or, you know, evenly matched or whatever, with themed art and stuff happening instead. I think that could be kind of cool. That might feel less invasive to Yu-Gi-Oh's brand IP and stuff. Another really big benefit, of course, to this is that it does bring in new eyes, and that's something that Yu-Gi-Oh could certainly always use, is just like, you know, new faces, more people playing the game is never really a bad thing, at least in my eyes. In addition to that, I think that it would actually add a lot more interest around just like pack opening. I know that there's been some talk about how Yu-Gi-Oh packs right now are kind of struggling a little bit with, like, you know, being able to like feel worth it. The pulls maybe don't feel like they're very good. Shops are having trouble moving the cards. And one thing that could be kind of neat without, again, throwing the entire game balance out of whack is by having like alt art cards that are based on, you know, Konami IP and things like that. Let's say imagine the Spiral archetype, right? If that was like re-skinned as Metal Gear Solid or something, that could be neat because you could get the regular Spiral cards, you could get the Metal Gear Solid Spiral cards, and the Metal Gear Solid Spiral cards might be, I think actually, aren't they based on 007? There's an idea. Yeah, it's like 007, I think. James Bond, I believe. Anyway, so imagine getting those, and those being the versions of the cards that are like harder to pull and they're exclusive and they have the high price tag. But if you're not actually interested in that, you can just get the regular cards at like regular rarities, and they're still totally playable, and all of it's functionally the same. So there's no game imbalance there. It's just, you know, a fun, different aesthetic take on things. And again, if you combine it with like existing Konami IP, at least to start, I think that that would smooth a lot of the friction that it might have with players. One last interesting tidbit I'll throw in is that Kazuki Takahashi, when he was alive, actually did a crossover with Marvel where he, I think, drew an issue of like Iron Man, or was it Spider-Man? I'll put it up on the screen, I think, or you can look it up. But the point is, yeah, this is something where like, there's small bits of precedence here. Yu-Gi-Oh's done a Puzzles and Dragons collab. That's another mobile game, and like Yu-Gi-Oh's been featured in it. They've done a Hello Kitty, McDonald's like Hello Kitty x Yu-Gi-Oh collab. So like, again, it's not unprecedented. There are little pieces there, and that's where I think, you know, we could, you know, vault into something actually real just for the card game itself. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I just thought that it was an interesting idea because I do see Magic the Gathering is getting a lot of success, and I think that Yu-Gi-Oh could at least share some of that success. But I do want to hear from you guys. How do you feel about this? Do you think that this would just taint Yu-Gi-Oh? Would they do like Magic the Gathering does and just take it too far? How far would you be comfortable with them taking this? Should it just be Konami IPs? Should it maybe just be like anime themes? Because anime is something that feels more like similar, like synonymous with Yu-Gi-Oh, as opposed to maybe like throwing in like Marvel and Sonic and Mario and Lord of the Rings and stuff. Maybe you just kind of keep it anime themed because that's how a lot of the card art and stuff already looks now. So let me know what you guys think about it. Those are just some of my thoughts. I think it's really cool. I think there's potential, but I'd love to hear from you guys. All right, I'll see you all in the next one. Pass turn.